Hey guys, it's Katie. Welcome back to a new video. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my February reading wrap-up. I am actually so excited to film this video because up until 5 minutes ago, I was getting ready to sit down to film this video and I was thinking I only have like 3 books to talk about this month. I read more this month than I thought. I actually lost count of how many I did for work for like manuscript evaluations and copy edits and stuff. If you don't know, I'm a freelance editor. I think I did 5 manuscripts for clients this month. And then on the published side of things, I'm looking at my stats. I have 5 books to talk about today. And we have a bit of a mix today. I had 1 DNF. I had 1 2-star read, which is my least favorite read of the year so far. I have 1 3-star read. I have 1 4-star read, and I have 1 5-star read, which is one of Max. We will never again get through a video without my cats making noise. I just tell you now. And I have 1 5-star read, which is one of my new favorite books that I read so far this year, but I also just think it's going to be one of my new favorites within this genre at least. So yeah, I'll have all of the books that I talk about today linked down below in the description if you would like to go check them out. The energy drinks have made a return. I know some of you were concerned in my previous video. We're okay. And without further ado, let's get straight into the books that I read last month. So the first book that I finished in February was The Lying Game by Ruth Ware, and this was my 3-star read of the month. Honestly, this started my month off slow. I did love it. It took me a while to finish it. It was disappointing, especially because the last book that I read by Ruth Ware was The Turn of the Key, which was one of my favorite books that I read last year. So obviously I went into this one with really high expectations. So The Lying Game is about this group of girls who all went to a private boarding school together, and I think it's the English countryside, when they were in high school, and this book follows them like 15 years later. They're in their 30s now, and when they were at school they used to play the lying game, basically where they just lied to everyone around them and got different points depending on how well received the lie was. And one of the main characters, her father used to be the art teacher at this school, and we know immediately that something mysterious happened that resulted in them all getting kicked out of school, and her father disappeared, might possibly be dead, and the girls obviously know something about it. And so the book starts off, you know, all these years later when one of the girls texts the rest an emergency message saying, "I need you," and they all come back together. So yeah, there wasn't anything technically wrong with this book. I still like Ruth Ware's writing. I think the story itself just wasn't as interesting to me or as unique as I found The Turn of the Key. Like, there were twists in there, and even if I didn't necessarily see them coming, I wasn't that shocked by them when they did get revealed. I wasn't like that upset about it. So overall, in a word, this book was underwhelming, and if you're gonna read something of Ruth Ware's, I would recommend The Turn of the Key, and I've heard from other people that her other books are better than this one also. So maybe just skip this one. This definitely wasn't my favorite, and it's just nothing special. I'm just very underwhelmed. I don't have a lot to say about it. I finished it, I read it. It was a decent time listening to it. I listened to it on audiobook. It wasn't anything very memorable for me. After The Lying Game, things only got worse from there. I read Make Me Want by Kate Robert, which is the first book in an adult romance series, and this was my 2-star read of the month and my least favorite book that I've read so far this year, possibly in like a really long time. Honestly, I really disliked this book, which was super disappointing because if you were watching my reading vlogs around the time when I was reading this book, I was really excited about the premise and I was really optimistic going into it because the first chapter was promising and everything went downhill very quickly from there. So this book follows Lucy. She's a lawyer and she's hoping to get a promotion at her company, but she's seen it happen in the past several times where male counterparts are promoted over the females if they're single. The company doesn't like when the women aren't married. So she hires this guy that she knows, Gideon, who's a headhunter, essentially to find her a husband who she can marry within the next year. And she's also asking Gideon to give her sex lessons so she feels like she's up to speed or whatever. And the book ends up being, I think you can guess, a romance between Lucy and Gideon. And the first thing I want to comment on, so I don't forget about it, was this writer's specific quirk. If you're a writer or an editor, you know that most writers have a word or a phrase or something that they just repeat a lot in their writing, and usually it gets fixed in editing, and it's kind of like a crutch phrase. Like, you just kind of throw it in there and you repeat it more often than you realize. Like, I do this, everyone I know does this. Everyone has a phrase or a word that they just use a lot. And this writer apparently this didn't get caught in editing, really liked the word personified in like the cringiest of ways. Like, I read the ebook through my library, so I don't have it in front of me, but she invited him over to her apartment and she's standing there in like leggings and a sweater, like normal clothes, and she's like, "Sorry, I know this isn't seduction personified." But it was just the one time, so I was like, okay, we'll just let it go. But then later she's like, "Gideon is just sex personified," and I was like, oh, there it is again. And it doesn't stop there. Then Gideon says to her face, like halfway through the book, like, you are a goddess personified. And this just kept coming up and I couldn't stop noticing it. But honestly, that's the least of our worries with this book. I found it to be very cliche, which also I tried to look past. But honestly, I didn't like our main character. I think she was just stupid. The whole premise of him giving her sex lessons goes out the door the first time they have sex. There's no like lesson being had. They're just hooking up all the time and promising to be exclusive to each other, and they get super serious immediately. And it's just like, the premise was background noise where he was supposed to be trying to find her a husband. It was just like all a setup so she could write about them hooking up and then catching feelings for each other. And it felt very like transparent what she was trying to accomplish with the book. There were a lot of tropes and trends in romance that were all just kind of shoved into the book. Like, she was clearly trying to appeal to a lot of different audiences, and I didn't think it worked. It just felt kind of forced to me. And there were things that would just come out of nowhere. Like, there would be added conflict 75% into the book that would last for 2 chapters and served no purpose except for pointless drama, and it just like didn't make any sense. Characters were just acting or saying things to further complicate the situation even when it didn't make any sense. I was frustrated with this book. Honestly, if you guys have stayed caught up on my videos since last year, I've been trying all of these different subgenres in romance to see if I can find something that I like. This isn't the worst romance book that I've read, but I definitely will not be continuing on with the series. I think the only reason why you would read this book is if you just want to read some smut, because there are a couple of sex scenes in this book, but the actual storyline, the actual characters and everything fell really flat for me. After that, I read What Kind of Girl by Alyssa Sheehan-Mal. This was my 4-star read of the month. I loved this book. Would highly recommend this one. This is a young adult contemporary novel. We're following our main character. She is a senior in high school, and she shows up at school one day and goes into the principal's office to report that her boyfriend has been hitting her and she has a black eye. And so the book is written in this sort of distant POV where you're kind of seeing it as an outsider's perspective and seeing the entire school react to this news and the impact it has on all of the girls in the school, and how some of them want to rally around this girl and try and get the boy expelled, and other girls want to support the boyfriend because he's like golden boy, track star, everybody loves him, even the adults. The last line of the blurb is, "What Kind of Girl" is an unflinching exploration of the many forms of abuse society inflicts upon women. And yeah, this book was really hard to read. It was really frustrating. It was really infuriating because it's very realistic. I think she did it really, really well, but it's just something that's really hard to read about. How honestly, this poor girl who finally steps forward to stand up for herself after being abused gets like abused even worse afterwards by all of the accusations and the way that people treat her and victim blame her or don't believe her. Even when she has a black eye as clear evidence, like everyone's like, maybe you're confused. We're following her, and then we're also following her best friend, and I actually really liked that best friend character. I honestly found her more well developed than our main character. I'm purposefully not saying names. This book is written in a really unique style, and I'm trying not to spoil anything. And I talked about this in a recent book haul. The book is split into 3 different parts, and part 3 was my favorite. And the first 2 parts are written in such a way, this first part specifically is written in a way where it might be kind of slow for you to get through, it might be kind of confusing. So I would really encourage you to push past the first part because everything gets cleared up by the end of that first part, but it is a little bit of a slog. Not even a slog, it was just a little weird to read the first like 80 or so pages. But once I got past that part, I was way more engaged in part 2, and then part 3 I really, really loved. So stick it out if you're not sure about like the storytelling structure at the beginning. I think you'll come to like it more after you understand why she did it that way. But yeah, I think this was excellently handled, really well written. I really enjoyed this book. I would definitely read another of this author's books, but also very difficult to read, and it made me like really upset reading it. So be aware of that going into it. The next book I have to talk about was my DNF for the month, so obviously I'm not going to talk about it that much. Was Revolt by Lindsay Miller. I got a little over 40% of the way in through this one. It's a standalone YA fantasy novel, and I just decided that I wasn't in the mood for it. It's not that it wasn't good, I just felt like I was forcing myself to finish it, and I knew I would be able to enjoy it more if I waited until I was in the mood to actually read it. We're following 2 different girls, Emily and Annette, who switch places and trade lives. One of them is from the nobility and she wants to go train to be a physician, which isn't allowed for girls. And then the other one wants to go to this noble school to be trained in divination and magic. I really liked the premise, and I could definitely see myself going back to this at a future date. I just really wasn't in the mood for it. I'm just like not in the mood for fantasy in general right now, and I keep trying to pick up more fantasy books knowing I'm not in the mood for fantasy, and then I'm surprised when I don't like it. Maybe March is the month I will finally learn my lesson and just stop trying for a little bit and stop trying to force it. But if you like fantasy, I definitely think you will enjoy this one. And then the last book that I have to talk about in today's video, I saved the best for last. This was my 5-star read of the month. I have so much to say about it. Was The How and the Why by Cynthia Hand. This was our book club pick for February. I run a book club over on my Patreon page. I actually have a full spoilery reading vlog for this book up on that Patreon channel that's over like 20 minutes long. So I'm not going to talk about it a ton in here just because there is a separate video all about that. But 5 out of 5 stars. This is one of my favorite books that I've read so far this year. It's a young adult contemporary. Apparently, I'm back in the mood for contemporary, which hasn't happened since I was like 17, so I don't really know what's happening with my reading taste right now. But this book is about Cassie. She was adopted when she was 6 weeks old. Her birth mom was a 16-year-old who gave her up to have a better life, and her birth mom wrote her all of these letters when she was still pregnant with her for this program that basically the letters are held by the state until the child turns 18 and then she has access to them. So we're switching back and forth between Cassie in present time and these letters that her birth mom wrote, where we're kind of getting to see what her birth mom was like when she was 16 and what her life was like. When Cassie turns 18, she decides that she wants to learn more about her birth mom. Cassie is super into theater and she's getting ready to go off to college. So there's a lot of talk of how is she going to afford college, deciding on where she's going to go to college. And then also in the meantime, her mom is in the hospital awaiting a heart transplant and they don't know if she's going to live and make it to see Cassie go to college, basically. And then on top of all of that, there's this new boy that Cassie has a crush on. So a lot of good coming of age topics in here. As you can see, I have 1,000,001 tabs in here. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. This book is 450 pages. For a contemporary, I was shook. Especially that it didn't feel like 450 pages. It didn't feel overly long. I was worried about that going into it. I was like, what contemporary needs to be that long? And this one just worked. I loved Cassie and her family. Her adoptive parents are such good parents and their family is just so warm and loving. But then also her birth mom, I sympathized with her so much and I felt like we got to see so much of her personality even just through these letters. And her life was just the opposite of Cassie. She didn't have a supportive family. They weren't good people and you just feel really, really sorry for her. And her baby daddy like isn't in the picture. There's a lot of sad content in here, but I don't think this is a sad book. I actually think it's really funny. There's a lot of comedic relief in here and it ended up just being a really wholesome and heartwarming family-oriented story and friendship-oriented story. Cassie has a best friend, Nyla, and they're super close and their friendship is just like really refreshing to read about. I think this book had so many good things going for it. If you just want something touching and emotional and heartwarming, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. This is going to like the top of my lists for contemporary recommendations from now on. I enjoyed this so much more than I was expecting to, and I already went in expecting to like it because I've read some of Cynthia Hand's books in the past and I really enjoyed them, but I think this is my new favorite of hers. This was fantastic, so good. Go read it. So yeah, those are all of the books that I read in February. I would love to hear down below in the comments if you read any of these and what you thought of them. I would love to hear your thoughts, or let me know what your favorite book that you read last month was. I would love to hear about it. If you're new here, I would love it if you would subscribe and stick around. I put up at least 2 to 3 new videos every single week. I'll have links to everything that I talked about in this video down below in the description if you want to come join my book club, look into my freelance services, follow me elsewhere, or check out any of the books that I talked about. And if you like this video, I'd appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up because it helps out my channel a lot. But other than that, I think I'll just see you guys in my next video very, very soon. Bye.
So hit me. So hit me. So hit me. First a confession. With you, I feel a connection. With